I'll ask you all to return your attention to the screens to introduce our next presentation.
This presentation provides a roadmap to prepare the workforce to take advantage of the growth in offsite construction by 2030. By focusing on people, technology, and process, Research Team 371 quantified the state of practice and developed a maturity model and scoring system to assess, benchmark, and track progress as an organization implements offsite construction. Here to present, please welcome Ernie Mashner, Mengus Wilson, and Dave Bullard.
Thank you very much. Welcome to our first in-person CII-CURT joint conference in over a year. It's great to be here in Orlando and to those that are joining us online. Earlier this morning, you heard from Research Team 370 on the 2030 workforce. Our research presentation is going to build on that group's efforts, but we're going to focus on leveraging the workforce shifts specifically related to offsite construction. CII has been doing research on offsite construction for nearly 30 years. Most of the previous CII studies have provided exceptional knowledge on different offsite construction aspects. Our research efforts focused on the missing piece, which is the impact of offsite construction on the workforce and how the companies that are represented in this room can benefit from this change in this evolving construction method. Why is this important? There are a lot of issues. As we've heard through multiple presentations today, our industry is being presented with a lot of challenges, and historically our industry is very, very slow to adapt. New and modern construction methods are needed to address these challenges. Offsite construction has proved to be one of these great solutions because there's numerous benefits associated with it. This is caused by performing a portion of the work in a controlled offsite construction facility and then keeping minimal work on site for the final assembly, final installation. It's worth noting that nearly 41% of the construction workforce will retire by 2030. 2 out of 5 people in this room will be retired to some sunny beach, maybe here in Orlando. Wait, there's no beaches in Orlando. We need to change the way that we look at labor, maximizing the use of resources that we have, and develop new ones. What we're talking about is not a new trend. According to multiple industry reports, the dollar value of the global modular and offsite construction market is expected to grow at a compounded annual growth rate of nearly 10%. The future is clearly moving offsite. As with several of the research teams, half of our efforts on this research took place during the COVID pandemic. We used this opportunity to seek the practitioners' perspectives on whether the pandemic would serve as a catalyst or an accelerator. There was a general agreement that the pandemic served as both a catalyst and accelerator towards the increased use and reliance on offsite construction methods because of the controlled environment and the ease in managing the workforce in that environment. Because of the pronounced benefits of offsite construction and the expected increase in the future reliance on it, Research Team 371 performed a research study that we believe will provide exceptional value to the companies in this room and outside of this room, including providing increased benefits by promoting real benefits and reducing project risks, which is what we're all concerned with. Providing for better workforce planning and management by using a central fabrication facility to support multiple remote projects. Being able to assess and benchmark and track progress on these projects, which leads for a framework for continuous opportunities, continuous improvement, and risk reduction, as well as improving the ability to identify shortcomings, as well as future needed capabilities. During our data collection efforts, we received a lot of constructive comments and great feedback from industry experts on where the industry was moving in terms of offsite construction leading into 2030. These are some of the examples that you see. It's a very promising market, and it's also very different than the current market. So how did we get to where we are today? We started by looking what was already out there on the topic of offsite construction and which companies were already doing it. This led to a survey, and we were encouraged by receiving over 100 responses from industry experts. You can see the experience that's shown here on the screen. From there, we dug deeper. We had one-on-one individual case studies and individual interviews, and we found that there were a lot of recurring themes that represented success. During the CII conference, I've noticed that we do have a lot of recurring themes that show up in every research team, that show up in all of the individual keynote presenters as well. The path along each one of these themes led us to determine that our contribution would be a maturity model and scoring tool, and this could add to the existing CII knowledge base and update what's already there. So breaking it down a little bit further, we found that there were 3 elements that captured these changes: people, process, technologies. And some companies were different paths along these continuums than others, and we'll get into some of those nuances later. The scoring tool is designed to be a pathway success, building on the best practices that were identified during our research. It provides enhanced identification of shortcomings that can be used to help people as they're moving forward to continually improve their offsite construction performance. Before we continue, let's define some of the terms we're using for the rest of the presentation. As I mentioned before, we focused on 3 main categories of offsite construction: people, process, and technology. The initial focus and task for our research team was on the people change that was needed to facilitate offsite construction moving into 2030, but we found that you couldn't ignore the processes, you couldn't ignore the emerging technologies that would facilitate this movement. Let's also define what we mean by offsite construction. Many of you in the room have far different perspectives on that topic. Offsite construction could be a facility that's just a few miles away from a job site in a particular city. It could be a regional facility that supports multiple projects in multiple states, or it could be an international facility that services the entire globe. Mingus Wilson will continue and explain how these work together.
Thank you, Ernie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start with the most important element for the long-term success of any organization and the focus of our study, and that is the people who make up the workforce of 2030. To help companies prioritize their off-site construction training programs, the team has identified the occupations that are highlighted on the slide and divided them into 5 main categories. These are the occupations whose function we found will be impacted significantly with the shift to off-site, and the slide highlights the involvement of those disciplines most impacted. We looked at this in greater detail when we're developing our scoring tool, more of that later, and it reinforces the need to invest in the important human element required to perform effectively under the expected changes that are coming. We found developments in digitization and technology use will increase the importance of developing and retaining in-house expertise, which will compel us to invest more in human talent and training. In addition, these changes will require companies to significantly reskill their workforce. The importance of some current capabilities will decrease and will be replaced by others, with an emphasis perhaps on supply chain management and maybe logistics. To build the necessary capabilities, companies will need to invest in their workforces as they transition to the future of their work. Currently, most organizations struggle to attract the digital talent that they need, and we will need to raise enthusiasm about our future business to correct this. To provide better guidance on the actual off-site construction skills needed by the workforce, the team identified some of the key skills needed for each of the categories shown. Examples of the new or improved skills needed in future include some kind of comprehensive off-site construction philosophy, focused design for assembly, and the operation of automated and computer-enabled technologies, systems thinking, process development, and streamlining. For example, logistics, by making minor adjustments during design, transport can be facilitated, oversized load requirements mitigated, knowledgeable consideration of load sizing, dunnage, weight, and lifting requirements will all need to be planned into the work from the very start. Placement and assembly, careful planning for tolerance expected in the field, and methods for managing will facilitate field assembly, connections and installation, an overall philosophy. A complete reappraisal of how we deliver capital projects requires a radical rethinking of the process at all stages and levels. We cannot assume that we can simply move forward with the old processes and have them be successful in this new environment. Some points to remember: retraining and new job skills will be needed as the industry shifts to a product-based approach for design and execution. Construction is traditionally performed by generalists on site in a difficult environment, with a large part of the workforce being temporary and manual. This is not conducive to consistent outcomes, and Offsite offers opportunity for real improvement. There is a need for a trained, skilled workforce, which will require constant training to be adaptable and dynamic, and some professions in some industry sectors may see their prominence changing. We believe that labour shortages will force us to diversify our sources, and this offers a great opportunity to include and reach those not traditionally part of our industry. Some of the attractions of Offsite include the advantage of offering a stable, permanent workplace that would attract people who are unable or unwilling to travel for project-based work. This controlled environment can provide improved accessibility and accommodations for persons with disabilities. Expect the introduction of differing personality types and new ways of working. This may pose a challenge for management to recruit and train for their specific workforce in the traditional way. On-site construction provides unprecedented opportunities for building a diverse, effective workforce, which could help in alleviating the forecast shortage in skilled labour. Some points going forward to remember: resource constraints and challenges will be a major factor in future workforce planning. As Ernie noted, current predictions indicate that 40% or more of the current US construction workforce will retire by 2031. The need to maximise the use of all available resources and making the industry more attractive will become critical. Offering training and steady work are key. Again, the shift to offsite construction is expected to affect workforce attributes. The 11 most impacted attributes out of the 43 studied by the team are highlighted here. Overall, the impacts trend toward the positive, with improved productivity, quality control, and the transference of risk from site to factory being among the major benefits recorded. Construction is currently the world's largest industry, but overall it is generally accepted that it is not performing well. The construction industry needs to evolve, improve productivity, and add value. Moving off-site will improve performance and ultimately add value. There is consensus that COVID-19 will accelerate this. More consolidation and vertical integration in the industry are expected. Areas with labour and housing shortages are possibly the biggest predictors of where off-site working will gain the most traction. In order to gauge the likely impacts of the changes foreseen, the team reviewed the survey responses and used that information to validate our findings. Some 87% of the surveyed practitioners expect that there will be a significant increase in off-site construction by 2030. Similarly, the study found that off-site construction volume will increase by 20% plus by 2030, with an average of 7% increase in fully automated off-site construction activities also by 2030. Individual success in these areas suggest larger scale with higher levels of standardization and repeatability, a trending toward greater industry consolidation, and a trend, again, with COVID-19 pushing toward a more controlled environment that will become permanent. And these changes demand a response. We also found that future off-site construction processes will be different in the following respects. We need to move from a single-trade prefabrication to multi-trade modularization and/or assemblies. There needs to be a move from customized off-site components to standardized off-site components. And the industry needs to move from permanent off-site construction facilities to portable or relocatable facilities. We also need to move from reliance on single-skilled labour to multi-skilled labour for efficient off-site construction. We also identified a list of key construction lessons learned, as well as a few inhibitors or pain points. Examples of the lessons were the importance of having an experienced integrated off-site team, being willing to adapt and work within the off-site construction framework, and having, at a minimum, a basic off-site construction training program. Investment in the technologies is wasted without the training in their use and the process in place to realize the opportunity that they add. As the digital tools mature, the workforce and processes will need to come along with them. Training therefore becomes essential. Some of the inhibitors and pain points included immature processes and inconsistent implementation of offsite construction, lack of a comprehensive offsite design solution, and late decisions to go offsite. We also found that a fully developed design strategy that considers all aspects and challenges of the offsite manufacturing environment, from project inception through installation, is necessary. Engineering tolerances, logistics considerations in design include lifting and connecting, as well as material selection, inspections and approvals. These will all be impacted and need to be planned and integrated from the start. We collected some insightful information from leading offsite construction practitioners, and this slide shows a sample business case study where the company has benefited from offsite construction in multiple areas, including workforce management, reduced labor costs, better productivity, enhanced safety performance, improved quality, lower disruptions, and pronounced time savings. Although there is no track record for game-changing cost savings, all the indicators as shown point in that direction. If we consider a reduction in overall workforce size, improved productivity and quality, concurrency on project schedules with associated savings and offsets, developing technological advances, improving life cycle costs and total cost of ownership. And also we noted that currently 1/3 of global urban households cannot afford a decent place at market prices. New materials, easier to manufacture and sustainable will come into play. All this points to unfulfilled demand, challenges and opportunity for our industry. The biggest development enabling the shift to offsite and the primary enabler that makes the change possible and lasting is technology. We've heard quite a bit about that today already. We identified multiple offsite construction technologies and trends that are currently used by leading offsite companies. Examples are BIM, robotics, mass production, comprehensive standardization, integrated modules, and 3D printing. It's this technology that is driving the change, and the construction industry is not immune to the impact and effect. Although not new, these changes could be real and lasting and lead to broad-scale disruption. These technologies in general provide the means for improved collaboration and control even at a distance. They enable data-driven decision-making, and BIM with a digital twin represents a challenge to the traditional delivery process. This is something that has CII and industry attention. And again, COVID is thought to be accelerating the shift to greater dependency on these technologies that will become permanent. We also identified the key offsite construction technologies that we consider worth the investment and training for the workforce of 2030. These include remote monitoring, smart sensors, artificial intelligence, extended reality, and integrated real-time management information systems. The combined use of these technologies in the hands of a skilled and trained workforce, competently managed, will improve outcomes and add value for those who implement effectively. Our colleague Dave Bullard will now introduce our maturity model and scoring tool that can help you to assess from a practical point of view how ready you are to make this shift. Dave?
Thank you, Mingus.
Thank you.
Mingus and I are kind of like that movie Twins, only my being from Oklahoma, I've got the really cool accent. So earlier in the day, there was an impromptu survey about whether or not there were other Aggies. Are there any other Sooners here? Any Oklahoma Sooners? There's one in the back. Oh yeah, that's right. Will, what's up? Okay, well, as Mingus said, my name is Dave Bullard, and I'm here to go through our maturity model and scoring tool. Now, any of you that have been on a virtual call with me or that I've talked to face-to-face, you know I've got a real passion for these CII tools. So I was first exposed to the PDRI with my buddy Ken Vonderhaar, who's here somewhere, back in the late 90s at Anheuser-Busch. I championed him at Ameren for 10 years, and I talk about him every day at Oracle now. So let me just jump in here and... Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is people process technology. So by now it should be apparent to everybody that it's very, very important to our team that people process and technology are done right. And what we're really trying to help everybody get to is that sweet spot, that overlap you see in the middle there, off-site construction success. Now, we realize that's not going to happen instantaneously, okay? There's going to be steps. You get a little better, little better. And so what we've laid out is a 5-step maturity model. And you can see it on the screen behind me. And I'm probably moving around blocking, but that's okay. Level 1 is initial at 6 months to a year. Level 2, repeatable, 1 to 2 years. Defined at 2 to 3 years. Managed at 3 to 4 years. And then optimizing at 4 to 5 years. Now let's talk a little bit about what each one of those maturity levels is. So initial, level 1, organization has its offsite construction development disorganized. So how many people would say they're at level 1 right now, disorganized? Anybody? Oh, okay. All right, you got some people admit to it. Okay. Repeatable, level 2, organization establishes basic offsite construction techniques, but offsite construction work is still reactive. We all know we want to be proactive, not reactive. Okay. Then you get to define, level 3, organization develops standard offsite construction procedures, but lacks quantitative measures. Okay, who knows the old adage, if you want to get better, what do you have to do? You have to measure it. Therefore, you should probably quantify it. So that's what we're trying to work past with step 3. When you get to manage, level 4, organization monitors and controls offsite construction procedures through data analytics. Data is going to be a big word for us. And then last but not least, optimizing, step 5, organization realizes the full offsite potential and constantly looks for improvements. So those are the 5 maturity levels that we've defined. Now what I want to do, and I'm not going to read all this, it's way too many words. I've never used this many words in normal life, but what I want to do is just point out a few of these attributes for various aspects. So we've got people, process, technology aspects. The 3 things I want to hit on here, down here at initial, recognize need to adopt philosophy. Who's heard the old adage, you know, the first step to solving a problem is admitting you have a problem. Okay, well that's initial, that's bread and butter. The next thing I want to point out to you is under people by repeatable. Flexible and long-term off-site career paths and opportunities. Okay, you can't look at LinkedIn, you can't look at news, you can't look at anything now without hearing more and more about how everybody wants different work arrangements. And I think every presenter that's gotten up here today has talked about COVID as an accelerator. I know these gentlemen did. So this may or may not have been coming with offsite. I would say it was, you know, but COVID has certainly accelerated it. And then last but not least, up there under process by managed, data-driven, fully automated processes. So when I got to Oracle a couple of years ago, I thought I'd be really cool and say data-driven, data-centric all the time. And they're like, no. That's yesterday's news. That's foundational. You need to be model-centric. So I've heard BIM many times a day. So if you aren't at least data-driven, data-centric, there's no way you're going to be successful trying to be model-centric. Okay, now I want everybody to take a real close look at this because you're going to have a lot of questions afterwards. Okay, I'm not going to read all this either. So this, however, though, as nerdy as it may or may not sound, this is what gets me most excited about what we did. A simple, intuitive tool, okay? So whether it's PDRI, PDCS, I don't care. Any one that I've used over the last 20-something years, they're painfully simple, intuitive, and they've got a mountain of data behind them. This is no different, okay? So when you see this spreadsheet here, I'm gonna go left to right. So the first 2 columns on the left, that's where you assign the weights for various aspects. So you see input 1, the first thing we're gonna ask you to do is weight the importance of people, process, and technology to your organization. Okay, so that's the first thing you're gonna do. And you can see in this example, there's values of 0.4, 0.3, and 0.3. Then as you move over towards the middle, you see those 5 maturity levels. They're each repeated for people, process, and technology. And for each one of those maturity levels, you see a practice that our research showed was indicative of having reached that maturity level. Okay, so far we've only got 1 input in. Now where we get into our other 2 inputs, first of all, we have status, input 2. So as you work through various practices, you're gonna change that checkbox from unchecked to checked, so it goes from to be implemented to implemented. And then last but not least, input 3, you're going to assess the extent of implementation. So you can see, was it slightly implemented, moderately implemented, highly implemented? So this is a very simple, straightforward tool that at a glance will let you see what you've accomplished, what's in front of you still, and it's very intuitive. And just before we get to the math and the outputs here, I just want to reiterate, 5 practices for each aspect, so people, process, technology, 5 practices for each, and a score of 1 to 3 for each one of those, okay? Now, why does that become important? Well, let's look at our outputs, okay? Output 1, 2, and 3, here you see the total points you've achieved for people, process, and technology. So very, very simple, folks. So for people, you have those 5 aspects. So you're just going to take the sum of the points that you've achieved there. So the ideal state would be to have all 5 done and get a score of 3 for implementation for all 5. That would put you all the way to the right. This is another really good at-a-glance tool. You can see where the needle is, and we've also got the red, yellow, green. Does anybody, has anybody here not used red, yellow, green charts? Please. I'm not even going to say it. Okay. And here's my last slide. Last output. This first gauge here, it really brings everything together. So we've got our people, process, and technology individual scores. We already saw those. But somebody is probably in the crowd going, wait a minute, Dave, you told me to weight stuff. All right, well, what we're doing here is we're actually bringing in the weighting to give you an overall score. So you can decompose where you are into people, process, technology, and you can also get this kind of dashboard view of where your offsite construction journey is overall. And then last but not least, percentage of practices implemented. That's really simple math. You take the number of practices you've done divided by 15. There you go. So that is a very, very quick overview of our maturity model and scoring tool. Last thing I want to say is I love enthusiasm about CII tools, and as we were doing this, Mingus had to kind of, keep a guy at bay, who wanted to get his hands on this, put it into specs, make it requirements, before we'd even published it. And thank God Mingus is more of a toughie than I am. He said no. So hopefully sooner than later he can get his hands on it and use it. And I would invite you all to take a look at it too. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Ernie for our call to action.
Thanks, Dave. So what can this do for you? To conclude our presentation, we urge our audience today to take advantage of the growth in offsite construction, certainly where we're headed in the future. Exploit the future offsite construction performance improvements and enhance project execution in terms of people, process, technologies. Follow a developed, proactive, and forward-thinking roadmap for better leverage in offsite construction. And don't fall behind by not keeping up with the offsite construction growth, because if you're not looking at this, we guarantee that your competitors are. 2030 is just a few short years away. We encourage you to take a deep look at Research Team 371's full report. It'll be available on the CII website in September. We're going through final revisions and reviews now. For example, we did 16 individual business cases that covered a wide range of industries and different types of contractors. Personally, the business case that I did focused on a mechanical contractor in Denver that I think one of our keynote speakers will know about. And they had a modularization facility that they used to service multiple projects around the United States. What you're seeing here on stage, for those that aren't familiar with research teams, it's the result of 2 years of effort of a team that consisted of multiple CII member companies, individuals, as well as our academics. And what you're seeing here on the screen is the entire team that was behind the efforts. We just have the privilege of being able to present it on the behalf of the team. Just a plug, those of you that haven't participated in a research team and want to get involved in CII, it's a great way to meet your colleagues in the industry. There's just a great cross-section of people that you can learn from, network with, great variety. On behalf of our team, please be safe, enjoy the rest of the conference, and I think we're ready for that avalanche flood of questions that have been coming in on the app.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was a great research team project and great presentation. I especially appreciated, Dave, your red, yellow, and green charts. Those helped me stay focused and follow along.
As they should.
So just a few questions for you guys. First of all, at what point in the project must the decision be made to go off-site? We've heard from people throughout the event a lot about off-site construction and kind of the motivators and drives for it. Often we find that there's sort of a spectrum of commitment to that sort of an initiative from the owner's position. And so when a team's working with an owner who kind of sits on the fence and waits maybe a little bit too long, they often feel like they're kind of forced to remain on site in order to have some parallel activities between design and construction. And so is there kind of a breaking point that you guys have observed where the decision has to be made?
Several of the case studies showed that as early in the process as possible during pre-design and design, because that can affect everything from a contractor selection strategy to a design strategy to a logistics strategy. So again, we saw one chart, as you make decisions later on in the project, costs tend to go up. So in order to achieve the greatest benefit, the earlier the better.
Great. Did the team evaluate any of the potential risks introduced by Offsite, such as earlier engineering, procurement, or logistical risks, or things that could be impacted by late changes, et cetera?
Yeah, I think we did. If you recall, we challenged the current process for delivering capital projects. That was kind of part of that. If you are going to go off-site, you have to have a philosophy and you have to put in place the processes to support that. I think the point that we were making was you cannot just assume that the current capital delivery processes that you use will work when you decide to do that way.
Mm-hmm. Would modular construction reduce the requirements of BIM workforce as it's more repeatable than compared to non-modular construction? That was specifically about BIM.
Oh, BIM.
Mm-hmm. Would it reduce the requirements of BIM workforce?
Would it reduce the requirement for the construction workforce or the requirement?
For BIM specifically.
Well, we think that Offsite ultimately would reduce the size of the workforce because you put them in a controlled environment, and the idea would be that they become multi-skilled. So if I've answered the question, the answer to that would be yes.
Okay. Dave, this one was specifically for you. At what size of project do you expect the tool to be of use? Under $1 million, over $100 million? Is there some sort of a range?
Well, our approach has really been to implement offsite construction at the organization level. I mean, if you look at that one slide, everything is organization, organization, organization. I think you get your processes, your technology, get everything intact at that organization level, and then once you're off and running, you can start doing that graded approach for, okay, this is how we do offsite construction. This is a mega project, but maybe you can ramp that down a little bit for smaller projects. Mm-hmm. But we really didn't target a dollar value at which to implement offsite construction. It was really an organization approach.
I'll add a comment there that the tool is intended to be scalable, and we're talking we speak to the processes and the things to be implemented to fully expand offsite construction.
Okay, great. Mingus, this one's specifically for you. Two parts. First, did you get much owner feedback or input into this data? And then secondly, as an owner, what workforce adjustments should I be preparing for?
The first part, yes, we did have owner input. I don't remember the exact number, but we had significant participation from owners. I think that all the details of the respondents will be in the report. Mm-hmm. And the second part of the question, what would an owner have to do? They too have to upskill their workforces so that they understand, well, one, the process that they're going to have to support, and two, the technologies that they're putting in their contracts as deliverables or for use. They have to understand that and have people on staff. It would depend to some extent how you manage your projects. If you're doing it yourself with your in-house staff, they would have to be trained up to that level, the same as other designers and engineers.
Okay. Ernie, is there a different expectation from moving off-site to local fabrication shops versus overseas and modularization?
Read that again.
Is there a different expectation from moving off-site to local fabrication shops versus overseas and modularization?
Well, it depends on the company and the scalability of the project. Mm-hmm. Large projects, there's EPCs here in the room that do have international facilities that support global projects, and they'll have design in one location and fabrication in another. It depends on the organization and what their goals are for offsite. If you have a regional contractor, then having a local regional facility may be better for them, and if they're doing smaller projects. So again, it ties into the logistics and the design and how all these things come together.
Okay. What feedback have you received from unions about the impact that this could have, good or bad, to the long term for them, and what training, if any, are they planning to support?
That's a good question.
No, we did touch on that. We didn't get into it too deeply. We had some discussions with a hospitality suite or a hospitality industry representatives who do hotels and things like that, and they had worked in places where they'd had some things, and they'd usually been able to come to some accommodation. It was a question of sit down, find out what the issues are, and I think they had to promise certain amounts of jobs or production would actually take place within the municipality where they were building, but we didn't really get off in great depth about that, yeah.
You guys mentioned that this should be scalable for the size of a project. Do you also expect to see the same benefits on an industrial as you would on a commercial project?
I would certainly think you could get a lot of similar benefits. Yeah, I mean, you know, when you start talking individual project, that's when you're doing the analysis. Does it make sense to go offsite? You know, but you know, I think commercial has done a lot of offsite and modular construction for years and years. I know both in the power industry and in the beverage industry, we were modularizing stuff years and years ago. So, you know, I think anytime we can make construction, you know, more like manufacturing and get those efficiencies, you know, get things in the shop, get it cleaner, get people closer to where they're taking breaks, there absolutely has to be an opportunity for those efficiencies, regardless of the type of work we're doing.
Okay.
I'll add that in the full research report, several of the case studies, we did have commercial projects, we had industrial projects, and I think the way that they're modularized are going to look different. Hospitality industry is doing a lot on the commercial side in terms of full pods of rooms that are being pre-built in a manufacturing facility where, you know, in other industrial facilities, you're looking at piping skids and equipment skids and that sort of thing.
Okay. This one was for Dave, but anybody can weigh in. If my company is slow to adopt offsite, how should we start the conversation to get leadership on board?
Well, I think you just have to run the CII playbook. You know, every resource or implementation resource I've used over the years has great information to help you, I'll say, sell a best practice, sell a tool. Our work product is no different. So there's a roadmap. You know, you can see clusters of roles and job titles that are involved. And so I think once you ask the question, is this going to happen? And you realize, yes, it is. Then you look at, is it applicable to my company? And then you can look at our data and see, yes, it is. Then you look at that roadmap, you know, then, you know, that should almost give you the script and everything you need. So, like I said, having, I'll say, sold, you know, PDRI, PDCS at other places, I think what we've put together will help all the users do something similar.
Great. And final question, is there any follow-up research topics that became obvious that are needed, and where is there a need for more insight?
Well, I think we touched on the major one about the process. I believe that CII are looking at alternate ways to deliver projects that would help provide guidance for people who want to get into this and perhaps haven't thought that through. So the whole thing, I think, is hugely disruptive to some extent. We've got these technological tools coming on. We're delivering capital projects who haven't changed the process in 30 or 40 or 50 years, and it's probably not fit for purpose anymore when we go there. So that would be the thing to do, would be to follow that, in my opinion.
Wonderful.
Right,
all right, thank you, gentlemen, and a huge thank you to the entire research team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and once again, please direct your attention to the screens for our third and final presentation of the afternoon.
CII's Data Warehouse is a first-of-its-kind benchmarking and research platform built with high-performance computing in mind. The warehouse brings CII's performance assessment program into the big data era, preparing to analyze more projects than ever with a greater richness of detail. Over time, and with the application of machine learning algorithms, this system promises to become the most advanced project analytics platform for AEC capital facilities. Here to present, please welcome Katie Johansson, Deborah Day Gazelle, Colin Choi, and Vivek Sharma.
Well, hi. Where the clicker went.
There it is. Oh, the clicker. Always important to have the clicker. So hey, we're really glad to be here to talk to you today, and we're going to give you the outcome of a 4-year, time flies so quickly, journey to rebuild CII's benchmarking tools. So Deborah, Colin, Vivek, and I are going to go through the past, the present, and what we think could be a really, really bright future. But first, I have questions. So if you get existential and you want to talk about what is really the big value that you get from any kind of a data warehouse, any kind of a database, it's to answer questions. And in my 25 years, and it pains me to say that, but it's true, of benchmarking, competitive analysis of capital projects, I get asked a lot of questions. And there's a lot of questions that I can't answer because I just don't have the data. Even worse and more infuriating, there's a lot of questions I do have the data for, but they don't believe me. So what's the benefit of having this kind of a database and having a resource to go to for information? And even though there's a lot of resources out there, some of them are great but expensive, and sometimes the data doesn't exist, or it's really hard to get, or it takes a long time, the problem tends to persist. So whether you get asked these questions, or I'm looking at some of you, you probably ask questions, you know, there's really a need for this data warehouse, and that's what's been missing in our journey. So we're going to talk about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The one thing I can tell you is there's literally something here for everybody, because what we've done is different from a traditional database. So we've been able to build on the capabilities of the past. We haven't let those go. But we've also positioned ourselves to do something new in the future. And Colin's going to tell you a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Katie. CII has a lot of experience and a long history of project performance assessment. But why CII? What does CII offer that an individual owner, contractor, or service provider cannot? Well, for one, CII has a large and diverse data set of more than 2,000 projects from various industries, various project types, and different regions. And of course, all of that comes from many different companies. Second, CII allows all of us to share data legally. We must stay within the safe harbors of antitrust regulation. That means when we share data, we have to do it anonymously, which is why academic practitioners like Vivek remove project identifying information and show the data in ranges rather than individual data points. Third, CII's data is ready for consumption. Folks like Vivek, as the data comes in, reviews it, cleans it, and standardizes it and stores it so that it's ready for access. And when you do call up that data, it is normalized for currency, for location, and for time. And lastly, there's economies of scale. By pooling our resources, each member here can have access to a full benchmarking program for a fraction of the total cost. With these efficiencies in mind, CII members have supported a number of benchmarking programs over the years. There's the Performance Assessment System, PAS, 1010, which Deborah will touch on in a little bit. There's industry-specific initiatives like the Pharma Program and Healthcare Benchmarking, and regional-specific initiatives like Norway and Singapore. And of course, launching today, the Data Warehouse. Each of these programs represents tens of thousands of effort hours to curate a meaningful and useful data set. And we want to take a moment here to recognize all of the individuals, some of whom are in the audience today, whose tireless efforts have contributed to building CII's performance assessment legacy. And it is this legacy that we collectively inherit today as its custodians. The programs of yesteryear used the best available technology of its day. But over time, as the data grew and as we developed more complex algorithms to better comprehend that data, we stretched these systems to their very limits. And 4 years ago, CII asked the question, what upgrades do we need to keep the system viable? When we looked into it, it became very obvious that big data had a lot of potential. And we also very quickly realized that we were not talking about a minor system upgrade. We had an opportunity to reinvent how we think about project benchmarking as an industry. So the benchmarking and technical advisory groups were jointly tasked with reimagining what that new approach could be. We had a new generation of tools at our disposal to look back at that treasure trove of data and do it from a different lens. The data warehouse is that platform that lets us use these new tools to generate new insights and do so with significantly less manual effort. More importantly, the data warehouse sets the stage for the future for artificial intelligence and machine learning, for smart toilets if necessary. And the data warehouse will be ever available as a data repository and a data source for current and future initiatives, which Katie will tell you a little more about.
So a few of you might know that I am probably one of the few people in the room that's not an engineer. I was actually educated and worked as a chemist for a while before I discovered capital projects. Or they discovered me, or maybe I just got tired of all the dirty glassware. Anybody worked in a wet lab? Yeah. But the data warehouse is set up in an interesting way, and it enables us to do interesting things. For me, when I was working in the lab, what did I do? I was doing experiments. I was testing hypotheses. I was looking for new phenomena. And the data warehouse is set up into this lab concept. Think of it as it's a sandbox where we can organize different groups and different initiatives using the same basic research platform to meet different goals. And let me give you some examples of that. We have the General Project Analytics Lab. That's going to look the most like what we used to do in the old benchmarking tools. We can do traditional project data collection. We already have a structure. So if you're used to using that, we have that. That's been set up as a lab. It's a place for us to play and experiment. We can set up a lab around a specific sector. So we have the Manufacturing and Life Sciences Lab. And in the Manufacturing and Life Sciences section of the data warehouse, we have data fields and algorithms and different metrics that are specific to that particular sector. Finally, we're setting up a new lab. It's in process right now around federal facilities. And that lab is interesting because that project, which Vivek is going to tell us a little bit about in a minute, actually has the ability to add operational data and real-time project diagnostic data into it. So there's literally no limit in terms of the research that we can use, that we can use the platform to store and analyze our data. In fact, we're going to encourage you to use the platform to do your research, to store and analyze our data. Now, the other interesting thing about the lab is we have to comply with the rules and regs that Colin talked about, which is the benefit of CII benchmarking. And so each lab is going to be a collaboration between the CII group and an academic practitioner like Vivek, who usually has very smart and industrious grad students, who will act as the vehicle to set up the data structure, to clean and anonymize the data, and to make sure that we're doing everything legally and appropriately. So not only do we have the tool for you to put the data in, we've got a mechanism so that if you guys want to set up a lab, it's like the old Bachman-Turner Overdrive song, if you get in with the right group of fellas, we can do something pretty special. So Vivek's going to tell you a little bit more about the Federal Facilities Lab.
Well, thank you, Katie. As Katie and Colin explained, I am a lab manager for Federal Facilities Data Analytics Research Application Program, in short, Federal Facilities Project, and an academic out of Clemson University. But before I proceed, out of my contractual obligation to Clemson University, I have to start all my presentations with "Go Tigers." Okay? Federal Facilities Project is a great model, great project, and great effort. We've been constantly hearing about all these disruptors. It has potential to adopt all those disruptions and create that disruptions as a result of that effort. Now, it all started with Walt Nacko, who was a director at Smithsonian Institute and also an FHC sector leader. He spearheaded an effort to, bring about all the federal agencies leaders in a room and said, let's develop a framework for federal facilities where we can measure and we can improve based on data-driven decisions, especially focused on their budgets and appropriations. And we have precedents already. We have similar efforts. We have manufacturing and life sciences, as Katie mentioned. We have a pharmaceutical group of companies doing performance assessment together. We have healthcare facilities benchmarking program. And that has all helped But what does that mean for all of you here in this room? That means all the like-minded peer groups can come together. For example, chemical group can come together and formulate a group that follows the federal facilities model and engage in performance assessment programs. Just like Federal Facilities Steering Committee came together and founded their program under two main foundational parameters. First one, research. First one, support for estimate validation. The second one, data-driven decision-making. But when you put together a group of good people in a room, good things start to happen. We started to push the boundaries, and we started to engage ourselves into some of first of its kind initiatives. The first one, as you can see, is trying to create a mechanism where we're partnered with users, agencies, to capture data directly from commercial software packages. The second effort, as Katie mentioned earlier, for the first time in performance assessment arena within CII, we started to engage in a framework that can collect data and create metric scores for operational side of the world. And the third was real-time feedback. Why? What was the idea behind that? We didn't want for you to wait till the end of the project to see what went wrong. Can we do it real time? Can we do right away? Almost, I cringe at the analogy from Ian Kahn's speech in the morning about that toilet, instant health of your project. And that is the idea. Well, we realize at CII, at Clemson, that data is the key to the success. We also realize we're trying to get data on sustainability, resiliency. Data is the key. Now, for that reason, all the federal facility group and the team came together to the drawing board and started to evaluate what is the biggest challenge, traditional big challenge for a successful performance assessment program. The number one reason that came to the fore was manual data entry, the sustained manual data entry. And we went back to the drawing board and created a model that really helped us mitigate that challenge. We're trying to map, so what we did, we were going to use data integration toolkits, which we'll talk about it in a later slide, but in simple words, what we did is we create data mapped models. And when we develop data mapped models, it allows us to ingest data automatically in the asynchronous or synchronous models, as you see fit. But often when during these such talks, when I'm sitting on your end, I often wonder, what is the good news for me? Where is the value for me? Well, the good news is this model can be applied to other programs. The good news is the CII already has a large legacy data set. The good news is with your greater participation and ease of data entry, we can finally build a robust database and finally leverage what we've been talking all about, artificial intelligence, machine learning. We can leverage all that finally to extract business intelligence. We can leverage data analytics. And when I talk about data analytics, I want to invite my partner in Federal Facilities Project, Deborah.
Thank you, Vivek. So I just wanted to let you know that, like Vivek, I actually do have a long history with CII performance assessment. In fact, I was actually one of the first full-time employees hired back when the system started in the 90s. And I started out as a database administrator and a programmer, but it really wasn't long before I was bitten by the project management bug, and I became much more interested in the data that was in there than, programming. And now I'm so excited as we've developed this new program here, because as the volume and the depth of high quality data increases, the potential for breakthroughs and insights are significant. Imagine the possibilities of being able to dynamically identify an optimal schedule from diverse inputs such as from suppliers, weather, pricing opportunities, crew availability, team readiness. It sounds ambitious, and it is. But sophisticated data models can be developed, and the system can be trained to monitor and to react to data coming in real time. So, well, how does this work? We're going to tell you. There's 3 steps, basically. And you're probably familiar with it at some level because it builds on a traditional approach towards capital efficiency and use of statistics that you're all probably pretty familiar with. So you start with collecting data, and you prepare it and make sure it's in good quality. And from there, you build a model, and you train it, you evaluate it, fine-tune it, make sure that it's working well. And then you go into the prediction level, and then you launch it, and you maintain it and monitor it. This actually creates a cycle, or it should, if you're using it appropriately, where you continue to revise and improve and expand and repeat on that model so that it grows in both accuracy and actually scope of what it can encompass. And the real key difference here is with machine learning, the model actually can learn. So it's different from traditional programming where you're just kind of putting in standard inputs and it doesn't have ability to think outside of the box. And so this is really the big power. And as Dave Bullard said, it's not just data, it's the model. How is this possible? Well, CII's partnership with TAC makes it possible. TAC is the Texas Advanced Computing Center, and it's housed at the University of Texas. It's a world-class academic supercomputing center. It offers a science-as-a-service platform. And let me say this again, a science-as-a-service platform. That's really important. That means that it is adaptable. So housed at the university, TAC offers high-performance computing resources, vast numbers of data scientists, a secure portal for rapid data ingestion, modeling, and the application of artificial intelligence. The TAC platform is a shared, maintained resources that provides all the hardware and the software and the security needed by CII. In fact, TAC is used by the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, the US Air Force, and many others. So you can see that it's actually a trusted, highly secure resource, not just by us. The TAC platform is one of the best and safest in the world. And because CII is a not-for-profit based at the University of Texas, you can actually feel very confident that this is the absolute best place for your data to reside.
Thanks, Deborah. For me, one of the key moments in working on the data warehouse was when I realized that it's not just a database. A database is very structured. You have to know exactly what's going in and how it's going in. The data warehouse is actually designed to be much more flexible. It's designed as a data platform, so it can ingest all kinds of new and unexpected data. And if you think about construction over the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a lot of new and unexpected data. Data that we didn't keep 10 or 15 years ago, that didn't even exist 10 or 15 years ago. A few examples. Cranes and equipment now have telematics equipment that can track every movement and every load. Construction materials have smart tags that record when it gets on site, where it's stored, when it leaves the laydown. And work processes, such as mobile systems for work packages or punch lists, track every decision, every question, every query, every approval. All of this data didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago, and the data platform is ready to accept that data when CII decides the timing is right to start collecting it. The data warehouse can handle all of that data and then some. Now, the providers of these data do an excellent job of analyzing it for insights, but it's usually done in a silo, limited to one vendor's data. What if researchers can have access to combinations of these data sets, look at them together? CII has already started down that path. It's working on a partnership to look at crane safety. It's going to ask the question, what can we learn by looking at the crane data in the hours and minutes leading up to safety incidents? Things like boom angle, hook load, running time, every detail that the crane's computers capture. By looking at many of these incidents and over time, the idea is to look for patterns that can help improve construction safety. Researchers, that's just one simple idea. Researchers can combine different sets of this data as they become available on the data warehouse and deliver value for all of us here, as Katie will elaborate on.
Thanks, Colin. Show of hands, who's interested in capital efficiency? All right. I know it's a big part of why ExxonMobil pays me, which is trying to help our projects be more effective and efficient and to do the best possible job that we can with the resources that are entrusted to us. I know that that is a core reason why so many of us come together in organizations like CII and CURT, is to help improve our capital efficiency. And just as we can design a lab around a specific sector or a specific group, we can also design a lab around an industry objective like capital efficiency. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that might look like. So CII has been committed to pursuing capital efficiency. And if you think of all of the research projects that have been done, I've been paying attention to CII for about 20 years. If you think about all of the research projects that have been done, it's a common theme, right? If you want to measure it, if you want to manage it, you got to measure it. And so the data warehouse gives us a platform to start doing that measurement. But not only do you want to measure the outcomes, you want to measure the inputs, all of the things that you do to make your project more capital efficient. But you can go further than that with the data warehouse. We can add different data sets that you don't own. Maybe you're doing a project in a particular developing world location. We can add data about that location. We can add, and about every location. It could be economic development. It could be corruption index. It could be the weather. And we can start to look at how things like that, intrinsic characteristics of the project and the world in which we do them, impact capital efficiency. So much as I would like to think about it, much as what my bosses, I think, would like to believe, we're not in control of everything. But if we understand what the environment is in which we're doing projects and how the different environmental factors might influence capital efficiency, we can really go somewhere. But to do that, we need to really do some more sophisticated data analysis than what we've done in the past. So let's talk about another level of insight that we can get using the tool like the data warehouse about how it affects our capital efficiency. I think pretty much everyone in this room works for a large entity, either a corporation or the government or a university, et cetera. And loath as I am to admit this, sometimes corporate policies actually make it a little harder to do my job. I don't know if it's just me, maybe it happens to you guys too. But we can start collecting data on those corporate policies. We can start collecting data about the rules that different corporations and organizations have about doing capital projects, right? That seems really far removed from the cost and schedule performance of an individual project, but it probably has more of an influence than we think. What else can we do? We can look at projects in a portfolio. And what's a portfolio? A portfolio is anything we want it to be. It could be projects in a specific location. It could be projects that have a specific business objective. It could be projects that have something else in common other than a traditional portfolio. The data warehouse makes it very easy to pivot, to slice, to dice, to group things in and look at things at the portfolio level. And there might be elements of portfolio management that actually improve or worsen our capital efficiency. We can look at things at the asset level. What's an asset? It could be an office complex. It could be a hospital. It could be a manufacturing site, a refinery, right? So what is an asset made up of? It's made up of usually a bunch of projects, right? We built them one project at a time. So we can look at things on an asset level, and we can look and see, are different assets more capital efficient than others? Did they have better project performance? Why is that? Can we understand what's driving that? Then we can look at things at the project level. That's what we're all familiar with, right? We do things one project at a time. And finally, as Vivek told you about the federal facilities example, we can then start looking at things at the operations level. So what's the trade-off between capital efficiency and operational efficiency? And that's something in my company we talk about a lot. Usually operations wants, the Maserati. We want to give them the Ford Focus. We compromise somewhere in between. So let's go to Vivek to give us a little bit more insight into that asset piece of the structure.
Thank you, Katie. Well, when we're listening to this theme here, the real question is, how can CII deliver its promise, its commitment to capital efficiency, right? And its impact on business outcome, profitability, the bottom line. We realize we have to break the mold and go beyond. So we allowed for measurement beyond the scope of project environment. And as a result, just like Katie said, now we're collecting data at portfolio level, collecting data at corporate level. And just one such level is asset level. And not only this will allow to measure the performance of their facilities over the lifetime of the asset, but it will open a whole new world of research potential, a great incentive for folks like me, where we can work and bring value to you. But for example, we're working with Department of Energy. They have nuclear facilities, a group of facilities with there. We're working with Department of State. Menges is here in audience. He's told me an embassy is a group of facilities from Chancery all the way to marine facilities, marine housing. Now, we can look at the overall capital budget of the project, but also start to evaluate the individual units within it. Same way, we can also look at facilities down the road and compare the capital investment needed to work on a 20-year facility versus 30-year facility. During our discussions, Colin had a great example.
That's right, Vivek. So looking at DCC or downstream terms, we can look at a refinery as an example. We can look at a refinery at the asset level, consider that refinery as a whole, and compare it against other refineries with similar throughput. Or for an expansion, we can look at the project level and compare like pieces from previous projects, like, say, a vac tower or a sulfur recovery unit. We can get more specific and distinguish between new builds, add-ons, turnarounds, O&M.
Well, that sounds like great, but almost what I'm hearing is he's talking about life cycle costing of facilities. And that's another area that we can finally utilize the data warehouse to get to. I know most of the owners are starting to look at that. And that is the exciting part. But in the world of data, in the world of technology, sometimes we forget the most important thing. And I often hear outside, what makes us successful is the people. An aspect of the people is what Deborah is going to talk to you guys about.
Thanks, Vivek. Yeah, the people side of the project is really important. And CII is committed to growing the data warehouse. Many of you are probably already familiar with the 1010 platform, and I know lots of you have used it before. Well, the 1010 platform is in the process of being migrated over to the data warehouse so that we can also look at the softer side of the project. It's a focus on the people, and it gives the leadership a unique insight into the project and the team dynamics and how it's actually working on the ground. 1010 stands for 10 input measures and 10 output measures. The 10 input measures are leading indicators, actually built off the CII Project Health Indicator tool. It includes things like planning, organizing, leading, controlling, human resources, the people, processes, and technologies that we've heard some others talk about today, quality, sustainability, those sorts of things. The 10 output measures are the more traditional hard metrics like cost and schedule and team size and capacity. When you put those two together, you really have a very powerful model. So the 1010 system is very easy to use. There's questionnaires for the industrial, the building side, and the infrastructure. And it's measured phase by phase. So you can get assessments during the phase and not at the end of the project. And that means that you can react to the project and possibly correct any things that you need to improve while the project is ongoing, while it can still make a difference. It includes simple, easy to answer, but highly relevant questions. You need to know how well your project team is functioning. It takes the right people, the right working relationships among project stakeholders, and the right team dynamics. If you want to get a world-class project, you need to have a world-class team.
Thanks, Deborah. So by collecting the right kind of data, both the hard data from projects and the soft data from teams, we're able to validate, advance, and improve the best practices that impact business outcomes. For example, with advanced work packaging, the next steps in the research are going to be to analyze and compare different projects that implemented different facets of AWP. What worked? What didn't? What changed? And ultimately, was the juice worth the squeeze? Another example is an ongoing collaboration with Research Team 383 to incorporate measures of Industrial Integrated Project Development, I2PD. As Vivek mentioned earlier, there's the Federal Facilities Lab, which is looking at the performance of buildings in terms of sustainability and resiliency. The data warehouse is the platform that will allow researchers to examine the data and build those models that help us better understand what makes projects tick. And as Deborah alluded to earlier, build even more models to help us predict where those projects are going. Katie, what was that saying that you had about models?
Ah, great segue, Colin. So I don't know a data nerd who doesn't love this quote about all models are wrong, but some are useful. And we've been throwing the term model around a lot, so I want to give you a little bit more of a flavor as to what we mean. Show of hands, who lives in hurricane country? Right? What's the first thing you do when one of them starts getting close, swirling around out there in the Gulf of Mexico or off the east coast of the US? Well, what I do is, certified weather nerd, is I go to the NOAA site or whatever, and I want to look at the spaghetti models. So what are those models, right? It's just a whole bunch of data that they've collected over a very long time about weather patterns and things that influence weather patterns so that they can try and predict where that sucker's going to hit. Hopefully not at my house. So we can do the same thing from a capital projects perspective. We can generate, with enough data, mathematical representations of a capital project. And then once we have that mathematical representation, we can use it to do experiments, because I would bet the project managers in the audience are not going to volunteer their project for me to experiment on. But we can experiment in model space, in mathematical space. We can tweak the variables. We can see what happens when we go this way and that way. And then we can also use machine learning to maybe tweak the models as we get the new and more data inside. So one of the benefits of working with TAC, as Deborah was saying, is not only do they give us, Cray computers to put our data on, they also give us data scientists and really smart people who can help us build these sorts of models. So again, we're finally getting to the place where we can take our built environment and start to digitize it. But we're not going to make you fill out a form and type data into the computer. We got a lot of different ways for that data to go in. And once you show us what you got, we'll structure it. So we can see some new insights and some new relationships and maybe learn some new things. One of my favorite saying is, what do you believe and what do you know? And can you tell the difference? So maybe using models, we can tell the difference a little bit more effectively and find those new insights that the human brain and the human eye don't actually see. So, sound good? Can I have a hallelujah? We're finally in the 21st century with our data models, and it's not your father's Oldsmobile. And I think I can say that. There's enough gray hair in this room that you guys will get that joke. It's not the benchmarking program of the past. We've gone away from the static form-based stuff, and even the static reporting, which Colin's going to talk about in a second. But this is a step change, and it could be significant. And I say it could be. And Vivek and Colin are going to tell you a little bit about how that's going to work and how to get started.
Thanks, Katie. The data miner is the user interface into the data warehouse. If you're familiar with previous CII tools, it's very similar in that it shows the data in quartiles. So you know where your project stands relative to the whole data set, as opposed to just an index, a score, or an average. Now at FLIR, we have our internal benchmarking programs, and we still find it very helpful to have CII data. We have about 1,000 heavy industrial projects in our database, but even within that subset, it doesn't cover every scenario. This data miner will be particularly helpful to us when we execute projects in a region that's new to us, or when we work on a facility or part of a facility that's new to us. An example that kept popping up that really illustrated the point was with a parking garage. FLIR, we don't build a lot of parking garages, either for our clients or for ourselves. But if and when we do, we can reference every hospital, every transit station, every office tower, any projects in any industry that did build a parking garage. And Katie, you had another great example from our early discussions.
Yeah, well, not for nothing, we don't build a lot of parking garages either, so we're always interested in that kind of data. But about 5 years ago, we set out on an expansion of our research and development labs up in New Jersey. And when in the conceptual stage, the people that were developing the project came to us for some cost engineering go-bys, some benchmarking go-bys, et cetera. And from an internal perspective, we got nothing. I mean, this is literally a once-in-a-generation kind of project. But at the time, we were able to work with some people at CII to get us some really basic, dollars per square foot laboratory stuff from some of the other industries and the other sectors. What we can do with the data warehouse is I don't have to bother people. We'll be able to go into the data miner and do it ourselves. So there's a tremendous value in doing those one-off projects and validating what we already might believe.
Right. So the data miner is fantastic for those one-off projects. But even for our bread and butter jobs, it never hurts to have another data point to look at. One current use case I'm working through right now is when our benchmarks don't line up exactly with that of our clients. This is where data warehouse can come in as a trusted, neutral, third opinion. It's like being able to benchmark our benchmarks, which is kind of helpful. Now, one of the things about the data miner that gets me the most excited is the ability to interact directly with the data. What used to be a static PDF report is now a live query into data for more than 2,000 projects. So when I'm looking at a metric, I can decide to zoom out, expand my filters, and encompass more projects, or I can decide to zoom in and only look at those projects that are very similar to the one I'm considering. Once I have that set, I can look at the classic cost, schedule, and safety metrics. But here's the new part. Deborah or another admin can take different available data, combine them, and create custom metrics. That's never been done before. So if you're ever looking at metrics and you say, well, if they could divide this number by that number, that would be very helpful, now you can do that. So for an example, let's say I want to take the total scaffold cost on a project and divide that by the number of weeks in construction, so scaffold cost per week. Now we can try that. Vivek, you've looked at a ton of project data over the years. Is there anything that you can think of that wasn't in PAS that you can try now?
Correct. I mean, we're looking into operational side of the world, so one metric comes to mind is facility cost index, all right? So it's assessing the condition of the facility and very useful for even insurance folks. But I can remember another example where when we were doing research on healthcare facilities, we found out that if you take the electrical size of a hospital divided by the departmental gross square footage, it was highly correlated with the overall project cost. But the idea is you can see such research and metrics out there, come back to the data warehouse, and start to play with the data and start to see how that pans out in the data warehouse. And that ability is very exciting, at least according to me. So.
Yeah, and the data miner will let you generate custom queries just like that answer specific questions that are geared exactly towards your business outcome. Now, this was simply not possible with the previous benchmarking systems, and it's just a glimpse into the possibilities that the TAC data platform offers for us. I think Deborah said it best in one meeting when she said, TAC can do this and not even break a sweat. Another feature of data warehouse that's really useful is the ability to query via an API. So for those expert users that have an in-house benchmarking program, you can use the API and have the CII benchmarks show up alongside your own. Now, we're not going to get too technical in this presentation, although between the four of us, we really want to. So if somebody wants to distract Stephen and Greg, we have another 45 minutes queued up. And I see nobody's doing that. So if you want to get technical with us, you can find us after in the showcase. There's just one more tool that we want to tell you about, and Vivek will talk a little more about it.
Thank you, Colin. Isn't it exciting? Great opportunity. But the capabilities of the tools are quite evident, but it's a journey. We talk about artificial intelligence, we're talking about machine learning. It's a journey to get there. In order to get there, we have to leverage all of your support. We have to come together and start contributing data to the data warehouse. And then we can achieve those things. But what is the good news here? Remember we talked about having good news? What is the good news for you? Well, the good news is we can start calling Deborah day and night, emails, talk to me about her cell phone outside, and get going. Well, on a serious note, CII and its staff is willing to work with you, get the data mapped with you, and use data integration toolkit for successful data entry, easy data entry. And that's the exciting part, as I see it, as we move forward. And it also provides you the opportunity to build new labs. But where can we make that happen, right? How do we make that happen? Well, there is a forum where we can take ideas into action, and that's what Deborah's going to talk to you about.
Thanks, Vivek. Well, I hope we have you excited, because this data warehouse is an excellent tool for you and your organization in the pursuit of capital efficiency, and you all can get real, true value out of it. How can you do that? Well, join the Data Analytics CBA. That's the community that supports this initiative. The mission of the Data Analytics CBA is to support enhanced project delivery through performance assessment, benchmarking, data analytics, those kinds of activities. And it really is a community. It provides support and training and a space for participants to access training across labs and to share challenges and successes. So what you should do is start with one project and use the integration toolkit to discover where your data in your in-house system lies, map it, find the quantitative data, and think about how you can make it, as time goes on the second project, third project, fifth project, 50th project, 500th project, how to make it easier to extract over time. So, and you should focus. Yes, we have 800 metrics. Yes, we can create new metrics. But you should focus on the 5 or 10 that are really the most important and meaningful to your organization. And start from there. Make it part of your continuous improvement process. Join the Data Analytics CBA. Join up and meet with like-minded folks who are having those same challenges that you're having, sharing the success with them. The Data Analytics CBA meets on the second Thursday of every month at 10 a.m. Central. They're pleased to present this tool, and we hope to see you at the next meeting. A data collection round is about to start, so the absolute best time for you to get involved is now. Katie, take us home.
All right. So we told you a lot of stuff. We've told you that we've managed to build on what we've done in the past. We can do some pretty cool things right now, and we're set up to do some pretty cool things in the future. You know, I loved Greg's analogy of the thimble this morning. Each of us has a thimble full of data. If we all pour that thimble full of data in, we'll at least have a bucket, maybe a tub, who knows? So we really want you guys to start thinking about, in your research teams, in your sectors, back home at your companies, about, hey, what kind of data do we have, and what kind of questions would we like to answer? And come to the CBA and talk about, hey, is there anybody who's interested in doing this? Maybe we'll charter research teams. Maybe it'll just be a small effort among a few companies. But there's an unlimited potential for us to answer our questions. But we all got to do it. The mansion is built. We're inviting you to move in, and we're happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. As an industry, I think we're swimming in data, right? But we've often been challenged to apply sophisticated systems and models to figure out how to harness that. And so I think the work that this group is doing and the CBA is doing is really exciting. We have a number of questions that came in. We've got a little bit of time to go through these. I'm going to try to organize them for you guys a little bit. Katie, I believe that this first one is for you. For years, decades, generations even, we've been taught that the first and most important thing to do during a severe weather event is to buy perishable items like milk and bread.
And wine.
Do you defend your position, and why?
I would say that's the second thing I do. You know, first, I look at NOAA and decide whether or not I have anything to worry about.
Okay,
Don't run out of dog food either. That's never pretty.
That's true. Okay, so I'm going to kind of organize these into two buckets. One that are questions about input into the data warehouse, and the other that are questions about output, what people can get out of it and how they can use that. So starting off, if folks would like to submit data, will there be a webinar or some sort of training resources available on how to use this and input data?
Deborah, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes, we are putting together training now. In fact, the September meeting is going to cover the integration toolkit, and we'll start talking about definitions and things like that. But we're actually also going to start recording little vignettes and posting them so that you don't have to necessarily come to the CBA at 10 a.m., second Thursday of every month, but you can access the training online at any time that's convenient to you.
Wonderful. Can CURT members participate? Are they able to submit data as well, or is it just for CII members at this point?
Well, if the alliance goes through, there will be a mechanism for them to participate. Yeah.
Wonderful. And are there plans for harnessing publicly available data or other sources of data?
You know, I think we would want to have a lab formed or a group of people that want to do that. I mean, anything's possible. There's sky's the limit, but we would have to have somebody who had a reason to do that or a specific request. And for those of you in the academic world, great projects for graduate students. Absolutely superb.
Awesome. Along the lines of CURT members submitting data, CURT as an organization has acquired a lot of data over the years. Is that something that might be incorporated in some way?
Absolutely. I think there's a great potential there, and I think certainly Stephen and David Groves over there understand the potential of that. And yeah, I think we want to definitely collaborate and build on each other's expertise there.
Okay. How does the CII data warehouse differ from IPA, if you guys are familiar with IPA?
Isn't this one of those questions that say no comments?
I might be uniquely qualified to answer that question. So IPA does a wonderful job in terms of building their proprietary models, but their data is by nature proprietary, and it's not self-service. So there are absolutely situations where that's the most appropriate way to go. ExxonMobil is an IPA user, but there are other times when we want to, mostly me, and there's a little cadre of people that are nerdy like me at ExxonMobil, want to go and do some of our own modeling and our own stuff. So they're not conflicting. I would say they're compatible, and they have different use cases.
Okay.
But this is different in that it's self-service.
Okay. Can you guys offer any sort of a sense of which industries and global regions are represented in the current data set?
Okay, please repeat the question.
Can you give a sense of which industries or global regions are currently represented in the data?
I mean, in oil and gas sector, I think we have data from world over. On the healthcare side of the sector, we have US data. And same with pharmaceutical companies. We have some out of state, but majority of them in the gain are US pharmaceutical company data. But, and then federal facilities, we're looking at all the federal facilities here, but because the Department of State is involved, I can say confidently that we have data from every single country, or will be, all the embassies. But I think it represents a great depth and width of data available from different areas. But please understand that the issue is not just the data, because there are types of metrics. You can compare cost growth, or you can compare your schedule growth to certain kinds. So there are metric scores that cuts across all the sectors, and that can provide valuable information to you. So it's just not the sector-specific data, but it also the general data that is relative data that can be really valuable to you in understanding how your projects are progressing.
Yeah, I can jump into that a little bit. You know, one of the questions I often get is when I go to a different region of the world, the question is always, well, do you have data specific to Australia or to South America? Well, when we look at, or not just that, but a specific sector, mining in Australia or mining in South America, that's a good question. But realistically, if you have projects from a certain continent, say Australia or South America, concrete's concrete. Steel is steel. It doesn't really matter which industry that part of the work is done in. You can still apply those same metrics, and it applies even if it's to a different industry sector. So there's a lot of nuance to the data that lets us cross-reference data sets that seemingly don't have much to do with each other, like that parking garage example that we brought up earlier.
Wonderful. Will you be capturing man hours for individual work breakdown structure tasks?
And that's one of the goals.
Yeah,
in
we
Project
can.
Offsite,
There's nothing to
absolutely.
stop us, but
That's
Great.
what the data platform's for.
Yeah.
It can,
Okay.
if we decide to.
Is there a set of specific baseline data that is recommended to collect for each of the 10 inputs on a capital project? And any recommendations on how to collect that data?
Well, we're going to be holding a training session, and actually so there's the 10 input metrics and the 10 output metrics, and the input metrics are actually things that a project manager and his or her team can easily answer. And so these are sort of about the team environment and how they're working together, and if they're in the project, they're going to know it.
Great. All right, so a little bit about kind of the output. As CII members, does everyone have access to the data warehouse? And is that limited or broadly open?
Every CII member has access to the general lab. The general lab has the relative cost, schedule, safety, changes, rework, and we do actually have definitions for productivity metrics, which would include work hours, by the way. So that's available to all CII members. Those who are participating in the sector labs with MLS and the federal facilities can actually participate and get access to the hard metrics, the absolute metrics like cost per square foot and things like that. And actually, we want to work with the other sectors to start spinning up labs with them too, to put into place the metrics that are meaningful to their sector.
Okay. If an individual member wanted to access raw data to kind of run some of their own analysis, is that something that they can do?
got my lawyer on the phone.
That's a very important question. CII follows, as Colin earlier mentioned, Department of Justice and FTC regulations, wherewith we cannot have access to raw data. The answer is ever, right?
Ever.
Exactly.
But that's why we have academics. So every lab has a lab manager who's an academic, and they can look at the blinded data and pull out some information for you.
And that's one of the reasons that makes it easier for you to share data as well, because when you share the data, no one else will be able to see, no other company can see your specific data. I think, Vivek, there's a minimum, right? If any data shared, it has to be at least 10 projects from at least 3 different companies.
Correct. I mean, it differs by certain programs, but that is a great threshold. So you have to have 10 data points from 3 different sources before you can publish the metric score associated with that metric.
And that's where, when I said about zooming in and zooming out, that's really helpful, because before, the report would just come back and say insufficient data. But now you can say, well, insufficient data. Can I zoom out a little bit so that we get to sufficient data?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for clarifying. Last couple of things here. CURT members, we talked about how they'll have access to provide input if the alliance goes through. I'm guessing they would also have access in the same way that CII members would at that point. Great. And then last thing is, does the data warehouse account for market variance?
Market what, sorry?
Variance.
I mean, we do it because certain projects that have completed, say, in the past, and when you are normalizing that cost to today's dollars, we are trying to engage in a normalization framework that uses indices that accounts for market variance. And in fact, certain indices even account for productivity. So that's a constant effort on our end to make sure that our normalized dollar amounts reflect market and productivity of the situation. And sometimes it works, and sometimes you have to adjust. So we are also open to building crosswalks to make sure that we adjust the numbers appropriately. That's why the steering committee is always involved, and we always are engaged in external validation of those metric scores.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the team. I think I speak for everybody when I say that there is a lot of excitement about this initiative and the potential for what you guys are working on. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Dr. Stephen Mulva back to the stage.
Thank you, Kelsey. So I just only have about another hour. No, probably 8 or 9 minutes. There's a couple of housekeeping things that, as the day's gone on, I wanted to address just real quickly. The first is immediately after I make some comments here, we'll start the we call Innovation Showcase Connect. And what that's about is it's an opportunity for you to really talk to the people in the exhibit space. We'll have more time for you to really have some in-depth conversations with them, get your questions answered, learn what the state of the art is. You know, as we said, it's been 18 months since we've been able to get together, so a lot has happened in the last 18 months. And there'll be some light refreshments, and that'll go on until about 5 o'clock. And then starting at 6:30 will be another evening cocktail party, very similar to last night, and it'll be in the same location, Coquina Ballroom. And so we'll want to make sure that you're there for some great networking. I did also want to mention a little bit, as this last team was up here, I couldn't help myself because I did benchmarking for almost a decade at CII. I think it was actually a really great bookend where we started with Ian Kahn this morning, talking about data and the need for this and everything that was going on in technology. And I just kind of wanted to stress that that's really important, but one of the key parts in the data warehouse is the automatic ingestion of data through APIs. So there's there's an interface, there's an ability to get a massive volume of data. It's not manual data entry anymore. You're flowing data into a data warehouse from systems that you're using for project controls, for design, for a number of other things. So that's a huge opportunity. And there's some questions about, well, CURT and CII, and so this is the thing that we're trying to solve. What you're seeing in the conference today, and you'll see tomorrow, traditionally this was CII's in time during the year where all our research teams presented. And there are 6 or 7 teams that are presenting today and tomorrow. And so that's actually a key part of why we want to be paired up with CURT, because the strong research innovation focus needs to have this output so that the rubber can meet the road in deployment. And all these teams are up here, and I'm sitting next to Greg, and we're like, oh, and he's talking about it in very much of a deployment sense, and I'm like, and as an academic, I'm a bit geeked out about the research. And this proves why it's actually the best, combination, that sort of yin and yang of the whole thing. So anyway, just wanted to give a little explanation to that. So the main thing that I'm up here to do is to talk about one of our major awards. And CII actually has 3 awards, 3 major individual awards that we give each year. This one is, we call the Porter Award. And each year we honor somebody, and we didn't do this last year either, but it's for somebody who exhibits the traits and the leadership qualities that Jim Porter is known for. And some of you know Jim Porter. It was actually established in 2007 to honor him and to recognize how he helped establish FIATech. People who have looked towards him and emulate the vision, the leadership, the technical acumen, the commitment to people, the things that he's demonstrated throughout his career. So this year we're presenting the Porter Award to Dr. Carl Haas. Carl is a university research chair and chair at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of Waterloo in Canada. We'll play a short video from Carl here in a second. I'll say a few more comments, though, about him. Because of Canada, he really wanted to be here, but traveling to the United States is kind of a big problem, so this is why we'll show a video. So he's been at the University of Waterloo since 2005. Prior to that, Dr. Haas taught and conducted research at the University of Texas beginning in 1991. His main focus is in the area of technology and looking at unique projects that impact the construction industry, especially in technology, automation, and robotics. He's used 3D imaging and other automated sensing techniques and algorithms to create digital twins of constructed facilities. And so these things are actually these innovations are in a lot of the products that you use today. One other one is radio frequency identification tags. Working on a CI project with Dr. Caldas and others, he was able to figure out how to first group to locate items on a construction site using RFID tags. And that's, of course, been a huge innovation. Today, construction companies use commercialized versions of that initial research to track materials all over the site. He's been a principal investigator on literally a dozen CI research projects since the early 1990s. And most of these have focused on that intersection of work process and technology, really to improve safety and overall project performance. He currently has been on, or over time has served on 3 different CII standing committees, and he's been the academic advisor on 2 different communities of practice. Little quick personal story is I actually had the privilege of being a student of Carl's when I was an undergraduate student at the University of Texas. He was probably in his late 20s at the time, but he looked a lot younger than that. So on the first day, we're in this lecture hall. There's about 60 people, and I'm talking to my friends, who's that new guy? Get a load of that guy standing at the front. Turns out he's the professor. And so he starts talking. We're like, oh, wow, really, really blown away. Just at how unbelievably intelligent Carl is. Over time, I ended up taking a lot of classes from him, but one thing that always stands out is you really know you're in the presence of greatness with Carl. Really phenomenal guy. There's just this, I say, a special humility to Carl, and you don't really realize how important his contributions to the industry have been. So while he couldn't be here today to accept the award in person, he does have a video, which I think the guys will run right now.
Hello, I'm Carl Haas, and I'm sorry I couldn't travel to be with you all today. I'm honored to receive the 2021 James B. Porter Jr. Award for Technology Leadership. Jim Porter was a model from an early point in my career, from my start with CII over 30 years ago. I'm also honored to be associated with the previous recipients of this award and with all the amazing people in industry and academia who I've collaborated with over the years on this work. In hindsight, it seems we have made a difference. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Okay, so that concludes the formal part of the presentations of the conference for today, and we'll reconvene next door for the Connect session in the Innovation Showcase. Thanks, everyone.